The Duchess's Silent Vengeance, a corporate takedown attention. If you crave drama, corporate betrayal, and unexpected twists that hit harder than a market crash, you found your story. Don't forget to like this video, share it with a friend who loves suspense, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a tale of high-stakes revenge, the Black Rolls-Royce moment. Have you ever stopped to wonder what dark secrets are hiding behind the world's most perfect facades? What if the person you trusted most has spent months quietly weaving an invisible web designed to utterly demolish everything you know? Imagine this. You're a titan of industry. Your name is a synonym for power, success, and billions. You live a dream life with an impeccable dynastic wife and a talented secret mistress you believe you're protecting in the shadows. But one night, at the zenith of your mistress's artistic triumph, a car glides up to the curb. A black Rolls-Royce, your wife's car. Suddenly, the earth cracks open beneath your feet. This is the story of how Duke Alistair Hawthorne, a corporate behemoth in New York and London, saw his world collapse because he fatally underestimated the two women in his life. Chapter 1. The Lure of the Imperfect Alistair Hawthorne. A name that resonated in boardrooms like a sacred oath. A financial titan in the vibrant concrete jungle of Manhattan. And she, Isabel "Izzy" Stone, his secret muse. A chaotic, raw artist whose talent he nurtured in the shadows, while his wife, Duchess Victoria Montaigne, commanded the blinding light of his public world. That night was Izzy's breakthrough, a sleek Soho gallery shimmering with her genius, anonymously funded by Alistair's intricate network of deceit. As the city lights twinkled below, he reached out a hand towards Izzy, a fleeting, damning touch that promised a future he could never deliver. But then, a soft, predatory purr sliced through the New York night. An impossibly elegant black car pulled up to the curb. Alistair froze. It was his wife's Rolls-Royce Phantom. The Hawthorne's penthouse on Park Avenue wasn't just a home. It was a manifesto. A testament to Alistair's mastery of high finance, a glass and steel expanse overlooking Central Park. Every surface gleamed, much like his wife, Victoria. Victoria Montaigne wasn't just a wife. She was a dynasty. Sole heiress to the colossal Vance shipping fortune, she had married Alistair not for his money, but for the thrilling ambition she saw in his eyes. She moved through her gilded cage with an innate grace that belied an iron will. To the outside world, they were the ultimate power couple. Alistair, the self-made titan, and Victoria, the blue-blooded queen. But within the air-conditioned, silent perfection of their life, cracks had begun to form. Conversations had grown thin, replaced by the comfortable and dangerous silence of two people who no longer needed words to hide what they felt. Alistair found himself suffocating in the predictability of it all. Then, Isabel Stone walked into his office. She was a burgeoning painter with a portfolio full of raw, chaotic talent, and eyes that burned with a desperate need to be seen. Her art was a beautiful, passionate antithesis to his own sterile existence. He rejected her corporate mural proposal, but he didn't reject her. Instead, he created a single-person grant through one of his obscure family foundations. He gave her a private studio in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, paid for her materials, and began visiting under the pretense of mentorship. She was real. She had paint under her fingernails and sawdust in her hair. She was magnificently, wonderfully imperfect. And Alistair, the man who had everything, found himself craving the one thing he couldn't buy. A life that felt as real as one of her paintings. The affair began not with a sudden explosion, but with a slow, relentless inevitability. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, the city outside the warehouse windows was a gray smear. Izzy, frustrated with a piece, threw her brush down in disgust. "It's dead, Alistair. It has no life." He walked up behind her. He could smell the turpentine and the faint, sweet scent of her shampoo. He didn't look at the painting. He looked at her reflection in the window. "It's not dead," he murmured, his voice a low growl. "It's just waiting for a spark." He reached out, his fingers gently wrapping around her wrist. He didn't guide her hand to the canvas. He simply held it, his thumb stroking the delicate skin. The air crackled. She turned her head slowly, her large eyes searching his. In that instant, he wasn't Alistair Hawthorne, CEO. He was just a man starving for connection. He leaned in and kissed her, and the perfectly constructed world he had built began to tremble at its foundations. Reader question: do you think Alistair truly loved Izzy? Or was he only in love with the idea of a raw, real life that she represented? Leave your opinion in the comments below. Chapter 2. The Silent Execution. The affair became Alistair's secret world, an intoxicating escape from the monochromatic reality of his life with Victoria. He invented phantom business trips to Miami or Boston, spending those hours in Izzy's paint-scented, chaotic studio. With her, he felt seen. She didn't draw him. She sketched the fleeting vulnerability in his eyes that no one else saw. But the secret was a constant, corrosive presence. Every vibration of his phone, a simple "thinking of you" from Izzy, a chilling "don't be late, darling, the Martinezes are expecting us" from Victoria, was a reminder of the life he was betraying. The culmination of his patronage was Izzy's first solo exhibition. He had pulled strings and secured a prestigious gallery in the Upper East Side for her debut, funding the entire event anonymously. The show was called Urban Veins. The opening night was electric. He maintained his distance, playing the role of an indifferent guest. Later, as the crowd thinned, he found her in a quiet corner, standing before her largest piece, a stunning, chaotic rendition of Grand Central at rush hour. "You did it, Izzy," he whispered. "We did it, Alistair. None of this would be here without you." He risked a gentle touch to her cheek. It was a gesture he'd made 100 times in private, but here, under the gallery lights, it was a dangerous transgression. He leaned in, his lips inches from hers. The world faded, and then, through the large plate-glass windows of the gallery, he saw it. It slid to the curb with the silent, predatory grace only a $250,000 vehicle possesses. The black Rolls-Royce Phantom. Alistair's blood ran cold. The warmth of the moment vanished, replaced by an arctic dread. He could only watch in abject horror as the rear door opened and an elegant heel, clad in a Christian Louboutin pump, touched the pavement. His wife, Victoria Montaigne. Action time. What would you do in Alistair's place in that instant? Would you try to bolt or face the music? Tell me your strategy in the comments. Alistair snatched his hand from Izzy's face. The movement was spastic. Victoria emerged from the rolls, wearing a tailored cream trench coat, looking less like she was attending an art opening and more like a general arriving to inspect a battleground. She didn't look angry. She looked determined. That was infinitely more terrifying. She strode to the glass doors, her gaze landing directly on them. She saw them. She saw the intimate distance, the hasty retreat of his hand. "Alistair, you're scaring me," Izzy whispered, her brow furrowed in confusion. Victoria pushed open the heavy glass door. The room fell silent as heads turned. Her calm presence commanded attention. She glided across the room, her eyes scanning the space, then fixing on her husband. She stopped steps away, her expression still unreadable. A faint, polite smile touched her lips, but didn't reach her eyes. Those eyes were locked on Izzy. "Remarkable," Victoria said, her voice smooth as silk. yet with a core of tempered steel. She wasn't speaking to Alistair. A truly remarkable piece of work. You must be Isabel Stone. Izzy, Sandabad nodded. Victoria's gaze flickered to the huge canvas behind them. This one, Grand Central. It captures the desperate, chaotic energy of people moving in different directions, all trapped under one roof. A powerful metaphor, don't you think? The words were a skillfully wielded scalpel. Alistair's blood froze. She knew. He didn't know how or since when, but the subtext of her words was a clear, brutal accusation. Finally, she addressed her husband. Alistair, darling, I didn't expect to see you here. I thought you had that late dinner with the Singapore investors. The lie hung in the air, pathetic and transparent. Victoria turned back to Izzy, a flicker of something. Pity? Contempt? Crossing her features. You have singular talent, Miss Stone. My husband has always had a keen eye for raw potential. Then, she turned her back on Izzy completely, her attention now laser-focused on Alistair. Her smile tightened. My driver is waiting. We have things to discuss, don't we? Her voice was an order disguised as a suggestion. Alistair looked from his implacable wife to Izzy's face, now a mask of dawning horror and betrayal. The choice was no choice at all. It was a summons. He had been caught, and now he was being called to judgment. He gave Izzy one last, pathetic, silent apology before turning to follow his wife out the door, walking into the rubble of his life. Chapter 3. The Price of Underestimation. The ride back to the Park Avenue penthouse took place in a silence so profound, it was almost a physical force. Victoria sat perfectly composed. Her calm was 1,000 times more unsettling than any outburst. It was the composure of absolute certainty, a decision already made. In the penthouse, she poured them 2 glasses of neat scotch. Do you think I'm a fool, Alistair? She asked, her voice devoid of emotion. Victoria, I can explain. She let out a short, sharp laugh. Explain? Oh, I'm sure you can. You've been explaining for 6 months. The late nights, the phantom business trips, the sudden, passionate interest in the downtown art scene. What I want to know is, did you truly think I was so stupid, so complacent, that I wouldn't notice? 6 months. The words hit him like a physical blow. She had known the whole time. His entire secret world had been a play he performed for an audience of one. How? How did you know? She took a delicate sip of her scotch. You're careless, Alistair. You think you're clever, but you're a cliché. The burner phone, the credit card statements for a downtown art supply store, the scent of turpentine on your jacket collar. It was pathetically easy. I hired a man, a very discreet and very expensive man, to confirm it. He's been documenting your little mentorship program for the last 24 weeks. The full report is in the top drawer, if you care to review it. It's quite thorough. He felt dizzy. He had been living in a fool's paradise, while she had been gathering evidence like a prosecutor building a case. Why? He whispered. Why didn't you say anything? Her smile this time was genuine, and it was chillingly predatory. Because, my dear husband, my anger was not the most important thing to consider. The Vance Woodson corporate holdings are. Our assets are intertwined in a very complex, very delicate web. A public, messy divorce would have been inconvenient. I needed time to protect what is mine. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. While you were playing patron to your little artist, I was meeting with my lawyers, my financial advisors. We've been restructuring trusts, moving assets, building firewalls. My father's legacy, the Vance Woodson fortune, is now entirely ring-fenced from yours. Untouchable. And now what? His voice was hollow. The divorce is inevitable, she stated. But taking everything sounds so melodramatic. I don't need to take anything, Alistair. I merely need to secure what has always been mine. You, on the other hand, she turned to face him, her eyes gleaming in the lamplight. You made a terrible mistake. Not only in betraying me, but in who you chose to betray me with. What does Izzy have to do with this? He asked, a protective instinct igniting. Miss Stone is a nobody from Brooklyn, Victoria said, her voice dripping with casual disdain. She is a project, a charity case, and you, my husband, have tied your name to her. You funded her exhibition. You've been seen going in and out of her studio. Mr. Duran was very thorough. You've made yourself vulnerable in a way I never would. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., my attorney, Martin Torres, will file the papers. Your corporate accounts will be frozen pending a forensic audit that I took the liberty of suggesting to the board, that there might be certain financial irregularities regarding the Artists Fund. An anonymous tip, of course. Your personal assets will also be tangled up. By noon tomorrow, you won't be able to buy a cup of coffee without it being logged and scrutinized. She walked toward the master bedroom. At the threshold, she paused and looked at him, her face a mask of cold victory. You wanted a life that felt real, Alistair. Passionate, messy. Well, congratulations. You're about to get one. I hope it's everything you dreamed of. The door clicked shut behind her. Alistair stood alone, the glass of scotch heavy in his hand, the full weight of his ruin descending. He hadn't just been caught. He had been systematically outmaneuvered and dismantled by the one person he had been foolish enough to believe he could deceive. Chapter 4. The Double Betrayal. The next morning, Alistair's life became the nightmare he had created. His bank accounts were frozen. His chairman called, his voice grim. Alistair, Victoria's team has made some very serious accusations. Embezzlement, misappropriation of corporate funds for personal use. They're talking about the Artists Fund. Victoria wasn't just divorcing him. She was systematically destroying his reputation. He desperately tried to call Izzy. No answer. A cold, new thought slid into his mind. Had Victoria found her? Threatened her? He drove downtown and found Izzy's studio locked and dark. Just as he was about to leave, his phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. Meet me. The coffee shop on the corner of McDougal and Bleecker. 15 minutes. Come alone. He saw her in a booth at the back, huddled over a cup of tea. He slid in opposite her. Izzy, thank God. I've been trying to call you. Are you okay? My life is over, Alistair. No, it's not, he pleaded. This is just my wife. I'll give you money. We can leave. Money? Finally, she looked up, and her eyes, even behind the dark glasses, were filled with a cold fury he'd never seen before. You think this is about money? I trusted you. I thought you believed in me, but I was just a toy for you, a way to feel young and important again. I was your raw potential. That's not true, Izzy. I love you. She let out a bitter laugh. Love? You don't know the first thing about it. You just use people. You used me as an escape, and your wife is using me to punish you. I'm just a pawn in your sick rich people's game. What do you want me to do? I made you promises, Alistair. You said you'd help me build a career. You said you'd take care of me. Well, the career is gone, so now you're going to take care of me. I will, he said. Relieved. Anything. How much? It's not that simple, she said, pulling a small audio recorder from her pocket and placing it on the table between them. For the last 4 months, I've been recording our conversations in the studio. Alistair stared at the small black device, as if it were a venomous snake. Everything, she confirmed. You talking about your board members, your insider trading deals. You talking about how you move money to avoid taxes. It's all there. I started doing it for my own protection. I had a feeling a man like you was dangerous. I guess I was right. This was the first twist. The first sign Izzy was not the naive artist he'd believed. She was a survivor. What are you going to do with that? He asked, his voice barely audible. That depends on you. Your wife may have frozen your accounts, but you're a resourceful man. You have money she doesn't know about. I want 5 million euros deposited into an untraceable account by the end of the week. Otherwise, this little recorder, along with the transcription, goes to the New York Times, CNN, and, of course, a copy will be sent to Victoria's lawyer, Mr. Torres. Alistair looked at this woman, whom he thought he loved, and saw a complete stranger. Izzy was not a victim in this story. She was a player, and he had just been double-crossed. Ethical dilemma. Do you think Izzy was justified in her actions, or was she just as manipulative as Victoria? Comment your viewpoint below. Chapter 5. The Final Move. 3 days later, Alistair sent a final text. Zurich, Friday. Credit Suisse on Paradeplatz. Ask for Mr. Baumann. Use the key phrase. The sparrows fly south in winter. He was complying. Meanwhile, Izzy, standing back in her darkened studio, reviewed the most incriminating recording. Alistair detailing a scheme to short-sell a competitor's stock based on privileged information he'd gained at a charity golf match. Something she knew was more than embarrassing. It was a federal offense. Izzy's stake was her survival. 5 million euros was not just a payoff. It was a chance to start again, perhaps in Florence or Paris, where her name wasn't tied to a sordid billionaire scandal. It was freedom. She booked a one-way ticket to Zurich. Just before she left, she carefully sliced her massive Grand Central canvas from its wooden frame and rolled it up. It was the only thing she wanted to take from this life, a reminder of her talent. Her determination hardened. This was no longer just about money. It was about justice. Victoria had successfully excised the nobody from Brooklyn from their life. But Izzy had been fatally underestimated. Izzy made one final, risky decision. She made a copy of that specific insider trading recording, placed it in a padded envelope addressed not to the media, but to the Securities and Exchange Commission, EC, Enforcement Division in New York. She wrote a brief, anonymous cover letter. Alistair was giving her money to buy her silence. But she was a woman who had learned that true power lies not in what you are given, but in what you choose to hold back. Chapter 6. The Epilogue. The Zurich transaction was frighteningly simple. Papers were signed, a passport was scanned, and a new account with 5 million Swiss francs was opened in her name. Freedom. She sent a final text to Alistair's burner phone. Done. As promised, the files are being deleted. Then she snapped the phone in half. She had no intention of deleting the files. That was her shield. A week later, the final showdown arrived in the sterile, glass-walled conference room of Martin Torres's law firm. Alistair sat across from Victoria, who looked serene and powerful. A complete victor. Torres began. Given the circumstances, the egregious breach of trust, and the clear evidence of misappropriation of marital assets for extracurricular activities, we believe our terms are more than fair. My client is taking the penthouse, the Hamptons estate, and all your voting shares. Your time at this level is over. Alistair felt a surge of defiant anger. I built that company, Victoria countered, her voice dangerously quiet. I was the foundation, Alistair, and a foundation can remain long after a faulty structure has been torn down. Then, Torres played Victoria's final, devastating trump card. Furthermore, we found a pattern of payments in the Artists' Fund that perfectly matched certain stock market operations. It appears your client was using the artist, Miss Stone, not just as a mistress, but as a mule, funneling money through her accounts likely tied to insider trading. Alistair stared, stunned. It was a vicious, brilliant lie. He had never involved Izzy in his deals, but Victoria had timed his short sale records with his payments to Izzy's studio. The circumstantial evidence was damning. That's insane, Alistair spluttered. She had nothing to do with that. Perhaps, Torres said with a thin smile, but a federal prosecutor might be very interested in exploring the connection. A messy SEC investigation. Potential prison time. Sign the agreement. Victoria gets what she is owed, and this unfortunate SEC tip that we were planning to provide simply disappears. It was pure blackmail. He was completely cornered. Defeated, he nodded to his lawyer. "Give me the pen." He signed away his life's work. 3 months later, Victoria Montaigne was on the cover of Forbes, hailed as the shrewd CEO who had wrestled control of Hawthorne Industries, renamed it Vance Woodson Global, and set it toward a more stable future. She had never looked more powerful. Alistair was living in a small apartment in Malaga, a shadow of his former self. His name was a footnote in the history of the firm he founded. And in Florence, Italy, Isabel Stone rented a magnificent north-facing studio with the remainder of her settlement money. The rest was invested, managed by a discreet banker who knew her only as Miss Stone, a private investor. She had mailed the envelope to the SEC the day the money cleared in Zurich. Unrolling the huge Grand Central canvas, she stretched it over a new frame. The chaotic, desperate energy of the piece no longer felt like a metaphor for the city, but a portrait of a life she had barely escaped. She took a brush, dipped it in white paint, and began painting over the entire canvas, erasing the past. It was time to create something new, something entirely her own. The reckoning was over, and for all three, an uncertain new chapter had just begun. The final takeaway: the brilliant world of Alistair Hawthorne didn't collapse with a loud bang, but with the quiet, liberated clicks of a woman's heels on a marble floor. He thought he was in control, a master of two worlds, but he was merely a pawn in a game played by two women he fatally underestimated. Victoria, the wife he betrayed, proved to be a queen who had been planning her counterattack all along, while Izzy, the mistress he thought he could control, showed the world that survival is its own form of art. This story is a chilling reminder that secrets are currency, and the debt always comes due. In the end, everyone pays a price. Final CTAs. What did you think of Victoria's final corporate move? Was Izzy justified in her actions? What do you predict is next for Alistair? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you loved this story of love, betrayal, and revenge, please like it. Share it with a friend who loves drama, and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Tuyệt vời. Tôi rất vui vì bạn thích câu chuyện. Để tiếp nối và đảm bảo giữ đúng phong cách và các yêu cầu bạn đã dặn dò. Việc dài hơn, bám sát cốt truyện, tiếng Anh, thay đổi bối cảnh. CTR tương tác. Tôi sẽ tập trung vào sự trỗi dậy của Izzy Stone ở Florence và tình hình của Alistair Hawthorne sau khi bị lật đổ. Chapter 7. The Unpainting. The Florentine sunlight, golden and soft, poured through the vaulted windows of Izzy Stone's studio. It was a stark contrast to the unforgiving, gray light of the Brooklyn warehouse. The studio, located in the Oltrarno district, the heart of Florence's artisanal world, was a gift of her ruthlessness. It was bought with Alistair's money, but it was earned by her survival. She stood before the rolled-up canvas of Grand Central. It had been 3 months since she arrived. 3 months of silence. She had kept her promise to herself. She unrolled the canvas, stretched it onto a new wooden frame, and then she began to unpaint it. She didn't use turpentine. She used heavy industrial white gesso, covering the frantic, chaotic brushstrokes of the New York masterpiece. With each deliberate, thick layer, the desperate, vibrant energy of the original piece, the piece that represented her struggle, her ambition, and her entanglement with Alistair, disappeared. The white was pure, sterile, and blindingly clean. It was a ritual of exorcism. When the last smear of the original painting was gone, she leaned back on a stool, the scent of fresh plaster and paint filling her lungs. The canvas was a blank slate. Her life was a blank slate. Izzy wasn't the frantic, eager-to-please artist Alistair had cultivated. The young woman from Brooklyn, who had craved his validation, had died the moment Victoria's Rolls-Royce arrived. The woman in Florence was Isabel Stone, a private investor with €5 million, a secure cloud drive full of corporate secrets, and a newly hardened core. She began to paint again. Not the loud, chaotic street scenes of New York, but minimalist, deeply textured abstracts. They were about space, quiet, and restraint. They were controlled. They were everything her relationship with Alistair had not been. One day, while reviewing her investment portfolio, the $5 million strategically placed by her discreet Swiss banker, she realized that the biggest risk to Alistair, the SEC file, had been quietly activated. She didn't have to send it. Her banker, on her instructions, had simply forwarded the anonymous tip she had prepared months earlier. She felt no guilt, only a quiet, detached satisfaction. Alistair had paid for her silence, but he hadn't paid enough to cover his crimes. The real game, however, was being played on the other side of the ocean, in the cold, unyielding boardroom of Vance Woodson Global. Reader question: what do you think Izzy's new minimalist painting style truly represents? Her newfound peace, or her cold, calculated new approach to life? Tell us in the comments. Chapter 8. The Queen's Grip. Victoria Montaigne, now the executive chairwoman of Vance Woodson Global, was not celebrating. She was consolidating. She sat in Alistair's old office, now entirely redesigned with clean, intimidating lines, overlooking the New York skyline. The public narrative was that the visionary Duchess Victoria had successfully navigated a challenging corporate restructuring, removing the reckless elements, Alistair and his cronies, to ensure the stability of the Vance family legacy. She used every connection, every socialite friend, and every ounce of her dynastic influence to spin the story. But privately, she was executing a strategy that would have made Machiavelli blush. Her lawyer, Martin Torres, approached her with a troubling report. The SEC is sniffing around the old Hawthorne accounts. Specifically, a few short-selling operations from 6 months ago, tied to a discretionary fund, the same fund that channeled money to the artist Stone. Victoria smiled, a thin, chilling curve of her lips. I had a feeling that particular loose end wouldn't stay tied. What's the timeline? It's an anonymous tip, but a highly accurate one. We can delay them, but if they find evidence of a direct transfer of insider information, it could open a can of worms that touches our newly acquired assets. We will not delay them, Victoria said, closing a folder with a decisive snap. We will feed them. She instructed Torres to leak just enough curated information to the SEC to ensure that the investigation focused solely on Alistair's personal trading patterns from the past 2 years, specifically the deals mentioned in the infamous Artists Fund period. She ensured the paper trail went dead right before it could connect to any of the Vance Woodson assets she had just ring-fenced. We need to show the market and the regulators that we are cooperating fully to clean up the mess left by the previous CEO, Victoria stated. A public conviction of Alistair for white-collar crime will not be an embarrassment. It will be the final, necessary proof that he was the rotten apple, and that I am the savior. Victoria had achieved the divorce, the assets, and the company. Now, she was going for the total erasure of his legacy. Chapter 9. The Exile's Despair. In Malaga, Spain, Alistair Hawthorne was barely recognizable. The once immaculate titan of finance was living in a small, stylish but suffocating apartment, sustained by the remnants of his personal holdings. His days were spent watching the news, seeing Victoria's face, serene, victorious, on business channels. Every mention of Vance Woodson Global was a punch to his gut. He tried to rebuild. He called old contacts, offering to consult, to invest, to give advice. Every door slammed shut. The whispers were worse than the open accusations. Careless, indiscreet, under strict scrutiny. Then came the final blow, the news report of his formal indictment. The charges were specific: insider trading and corporate fraud, specifically related to stock manipulation, during his time as CEO of Hawthorne Industries. The evidence, the prosecutor said, was overwhelming, meticulously documented, and clearly pointed to a systematic abuse of his position, including a period where he funneled ill-gotten gains through a spurious artists' fund. Alistair sat in his empty apartment, staring at the screen. He understood instantly. Victoria had not saved him. She had sacrificed him. She had used the investigation he had tried to prevent, channeled it with precision, and ensured that he took the full blame for the mess. He felt a terrible, dawning realization about Izzy. He pulled out the crumpled note with her last disposable number and frantically sent a text, a pathetic plea. "Was it you? Did you send the file?" The reply came almost instantly from a number with an Italian country code. "The sparrows have already flown, Alistair. You should have paid attention to the flight path." The cold realization hit him. He had been outplayed by both women. Victoria had crushed his empire. Izzy had secured his downfall. He had seen Izzy as a victim, a fragile thing he could protect. He had seen Victoria as a wife, a complacent partner he could appease. He was wrong on every count. He looked out at the Mediterranean Sea, the blue vastness only emphasizing his isolation. He had built his life on ambition and deceit, but he had lost it to strategic, cold-blooded planning. Final question. Alistair is now completely isolated, facing prison, while Victoria and Izzy have secured their power. What do you think is the one lesson he should take away from this entire ordeal? Comment your thoughts below. Meaningful conclusions. The story of Alistair, Victoria, and Izzy is a chilling fable for the modern age. Alistair's flaw was not just infidelity. It was his arrogance. He operated in a binary world of power and weakness, failing to recognize that true power often operates in the shadows, waiting for the precise, calculated moment to strike. Victoria's vengeance was not emotional. It was a perfect corporate execution, a testament to the fact that bloodlines and legacy often trump mere ambition. And Izzy? She proved that the underdog, when faced with destruction, can transform into the most dangerous opponent of all. She didn't seek revenge. She sought self-determination, weaponizing the secrets of the powerful to buy her way to a new, clean life. The most dangerous people in the world are often the ones you have discounted. If you enjoyed this deep dive into corporate betrayal, financial maneuvers, and the quiet power of two formidable women, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with anyone who loves a good high society scandal, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell for the next twist-filled tale. Tuyet voi, tôi rất vui vì bạn muốn tiếp tục câu chuyện. Mặc dù câu chuyện đã đi đến một kết thúc khá trọn vẹn, Victoria thắng lớn, Alistair sụp đổ và Izzy tự do, chúng ta vẫn có thể thêm một chương mới tập trung vào hậu quả không ngờ và sự chậm trán cuối cùng giữa Victoria và Izzy, chứng minh rằng ngay cả người chiến thắng cũng có thể có một đối thủ tiềm ẩn. Chapter 10. The Unseen. Loose end. It had been 6 months since Alistair Hawthorne was formally indicted, and 3 months since Victoria Montaigne had fully consolidated Vance Woodson Global. She was the undisputed monarch of her world. Every business magazine praised her brilliant, decisive leadership. She had what she wanted: the power, the legacy, and the satisfying solitude of the victor. Yet the silence in the Park Avenue penthouse, now hers alone, was heavier than ever. It was the silence of a structure that had been perfectly cleaned, but lacked soul. She looked at the polished Carrara marble floors, the dust-free crystal, and felt an unfamiliar chill. She had eliminated the chaos, but she had also eliminated the only person who had ever truly challenged her, even in betrayal. One crisp autumn morning, Victoria's composure was tested by a discreet call from her lawyer, Martin Torres. "Duchess, we have a small, technical issue." Torres's voice, usually a comforting baritone of authority, held a thread of anxiety. "The SEC investigation into Alistair is progressing, but they've hit a wall regarding the Artists Fund trail. They have enough for the conviction, but they are still pushing for the source of their anonymous tip. They believe the information was too precise to be an angry wife's revenge." Victoria leaned back, a faint headache beginning to pulse behind her eyes. It was his mistress, Izzy Stone. She recorded him. She used it for a payoff and then, clearly, for spite. "Yes, but she's gone. And here's the anomaly," Torres continued. "The SEC is now focusing on a secondary, smaller transaction trail connected to the Artists Fund, a transaction that happened after Alistair was supposedly cut off from most of his resources. A small but significant payment to a firm in Geneva. It's too minor to be part of the insider trading, but it's enough to keep the investigation open." Victoria frowned. Alistair would have never been that careless. "What was the payment for, Martin?" "It was a payment for a creative consultancy fee just days before Alistair signed the divorce agreement. It's highly suspicious. We believe that Miss Stone, Izzy, may not have acted alone." Torres paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "We believe there might have been a third party who helped Izzy negotiate, secure the $5 million, and possibly provided the initial infrastructure to set up the SEC tip. Someone who knew Alistair's vulnerabilities and our strategy intimately." Victoria slowly put down her pen. The silence of the penthouse felt suffocating again. She had anticipated Alistair's greed and Izzy's desperation, but she hadn't anticipated an invisible hand. "Think deeply. Who do you think this third party could be? A disgruntled board member, a former colleague, or someone closer to Victoria herself? Share your best theory in the comments." Chapter 11. The Unexpected Encounter. Meanwhile, in Florence, Izzy Stone was flourishing. She had secured a small, quiet exhibition at a niche, highly respected gallery in Milan. Her new minimalist abstracts, clean, stark canvases named The Whiteout, Gilded Cage, and The Clean Slate, were a quiet sensation. Critics praised their uncompromising precision and cold, beautiful confidence. Izzy, now a polished, self-possessed woman in her late 20s, was preparing for a critical dinner with a major European collector. She was no longer wearing paint-splattered jeans. She wore tailored silk that spoke of controlled wealth. As she was adjusting her jewelry in the mirrored hallway of her apartment, her phone chimed. It was an email from her private Swiss bank. Subject: Secure message. Incoming wire request. The message was brief, anonymous, and contained a single line of text. "I admire your precision. I would like to purchase your piece, Gilded Cage, directly. I will pay double the current market rate, and I will deliver it myself. Florence, tomorrow, 11 a.m., Uffizi Gallery viewing platform. Come alone. VM." Izzy's blood ran cold, then immediately heated with a fierce clarity. VM Victoria Montaigne. The Duchess. Victoria was here. The Queen had tracked down the pawn she thought she had eliminated. Izzy didn't hesitate. She didn't call her banker or a lawyer. She walked to her storage room, opened a fireproof safe, and pulled out the small, sealed envelope addressed to the SEC, her second insurance policy. She placed it inside the rolled canvas of the whiteout. Then, she sent a one-word reply to the anonymous email. Accepted. Chapter 2. The Unmasking. The next morning was clear and bright. Izzy was at the Uffizi platform precisely at 11 a.m., the rolled canvas of the whiteout, containing the secret SEC file, tucked discreetly under her arm, posing as a casual tourist. Victoria Montaigne arrived on time, walking across the cobblestones with the effortless grace of European royalty. She wasn't wearing a trench coat. She wore a bespoke, light gray suit that was as sharp and unforgiving as a knife edge. "Miss Stone," Victoria said, her voice softer than Izzy remembered, yet carrying the unmistakable weight of power. "Florence suits you. You have a look of refinement now." "Duchess," Izzy replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "You look exactly as I imagined a true victor would. Triumphant." "The triumph is only complete when all threads are tied," Victoria said, her eyes narrowing. "Tell me about Geneva. Tell me about the creative consultancy fee paid to a firm that specializes in corporate asset protection." Izzy smiled, a slow, confident smile that reached her eyes for the first time. "That was my fee for the best corporate consulting I ever received, Duchess. Yours." Victoria tilted her head, confused. "Mine?" "Yes. You taught me everything. You taught me that the only way to beat a powerful man is not with emotion, but with strategy. You taught me that you must secure your assets, eliminate all leverage, and make yourself untouchable. I was the nobody from Brooklyn, but I listened. When Alistair ran after you, leaving me alone in that gallery, I learned that I was on my own, and I prepared my own exit plan." "So you orchestrated his downfall for profit," Victoria stated, not as a question, but a final judgment. "No, you orchestrated his downfall for legacy. I simply used his collateral damage for my freedom. You wanted him gone. I wanted 5 million euros and a clean start. We both got what we wanted. The Geneva firm simply ensured the money was untraceable, and that the SEC tip was delivered just precisely enough to secure his fate without touching your assets, as you wished." Victoria stared at Izzy, the calm mask finally cracking, replaced by a flash of genuine, cold respect. "You are a far more dangerous artist than your paintings suggest, Miss Stone. And you, Duchess, are a far more dangerous woman than your socialite gowns suggest. We are simply two sides of the same coin, survivors of Alistair Hawthorne." Victoria reached into her bag and pulled out a check. It wasn't double the market rate. It was triple. "Here is for Gilded Cage. I will consider it a consulting fee for the next time I need to clean house." Izzy accepted the check, not with gratitude, but with equal poise. "It was a pleasure doing business with you, Duchess." As Victoria turned to leave, she paused. "One final thing. You never mentioned the SEC package, the tip that finalized his conviction. You sent it yourself, didn't you?" Izzy gently tapped the rolled canvas under her arm, the one containing the second SEC file. "The art of survival, Duchess, is never showing your final masterpiece until the buyer is paid. And even then, you always keep a copy of the blueprint." Victoria walked away, her heels clicking on the stones, the same sound that heralded Alistair's destruction. But this time, the sound was not of victory. It was the sound of a queen who realized she had just forged a truce with an equal, an entirely new kind of corporate predator she herself had created. The reckoning had ended, but the real power game had just begun. Meaningful conclusion. The saga concludes not with a loud defeat, but with a chilling, mutual understanding. Victoria Montaigne won the empire, but she lost her moral compass and created her most formidable challenger in the process. Alistair's greed made him lose everything. Izzy Stone, the greatest survivor, used the system's own cold logic to buy her freedom and her future. The ultimate lesson? In the highest circles of power, there are no victims, only players. And when you underestimate someone, you don't just lose money. You may be creating your own executioner. Thank you for staying with us through this entire epic saga. If you were on the edge of your seat, please give this video a final like, share this incredible conclusion, and subscribe for more stories where the quietest players often hold the most power. 6 months after her strategic meeting with Izzy, Victoria Montaigne watched the news with a detached, professional air. Alistair Hawthorne was convicted on multiple counts of insider trading and corporate fraud. He received a significant prison sentence. His fall was spectacular, public, and total. Victoria had won the war, secured her legacy, and elevated Vance Woodson Global to new heights of perceived integrity. The market loved her ruthlessness. The press admired her composure. She was the icon of self-made, or rather, self-saved success. Yet Victoria could not shake the memory of Izzy Stone in Florence. The subtle threat, the equal gaze. She often found herself staring out at the skyline, wondering what a woman who was just as dangerous as herself would do next. The blueprint Izzy had mentioned, the ultimate insurance policy, haunted her. Victoria had Martin Torres initiate an extensive, covert audit of every single transaction that passed through the artist's fund, checking for any residual paper trail that might connect to Vance Woodson Global. They found nothing. Izzy Stone had been meticulously clean, covering her tracks with the precision of a master forger. Victoria realized the blueprint wasn't a file that tied her to Alistair's crimes. It was a file that could expose her own strategy. If the public knew she had actively steered the SEC investigation to destroy her husband and shield her own assets, her reputation, the very foundation of her current power, would crumble. Victoria, the queen of corporate integrity, was now bound by the silence of the young artist she had tried to erase. The victory felt less like freedom and more like a shared, dangerous secret. Final judgment. Alistair is paying for his crime, but Victoria's victory is built on a lie. Who, in the end, is more corrupt? The greedy man who cheated? Or the ruthless woman who used the law to destroy him? Post your verdict in the comments. Chapter 14. The legacy of the whiteout in Florence. Izzy Stone was no longer just an artist. She was an enigma. Her exhibitions in Milan, Paris, and London were sellouts. Her canvases, particularly the Whiteout series, massive, layered works of blinding white, were lauded as a radical commentary on modern wealth, purity, and the cost of anonymity. She used the 5 million euros wisely, establishing the Stone Foundation for Artists' Autonomy. It was a quiet fund that provided grants to artists without requiring them to sign over intellectual property or submit to mentorship. It was the antithesis of the toxic patronage Alistair had offered her. Her legacy was not the art she sold, but the artists she empowered. Izzy, now entirely self-sufficient, never mentioned her past. She had successfully bleached her identity of the Hawthorne scandal. One afternoon, a journalist, a young, sharp woman who had been trying to get an interview for months, finally cornered Izzy at a gallery opening in Paris. "Ms. Stone, your Whiteout series. Critics say it suggests a deliberate erasure of a painful past. Is that true? Was there something specific you were painting over?" Izzy looked at the journalist, her eyes cool and intelligent. She smiled, a genuine, serene smile. Every canvas has layers of past mistakes. The trick is to know when to stop covering them up and start painting something new. The Whiteout isn't about covering the past, it's about claiming the future. Chapter 15. The True Blueprint. Final twist. The story seemed complete. Alistair defeated, Victoria triumphant but constrained, Izzy free and successful. But the blueprint remained. 2 years after Alistair's conviction, A prestigious London auction house announced a major sale, a unique collection of personal effects and early works by the acclaimed Isabel Stone. Amidst the chaos of her vibrant early sketches was a small, unassuming digital drawing pad. The lot was purchased anonymously by a high-profile corporate lawyer in New York. A week later, Martin Torres received a package at his office. It was from the lawyer who had purchased the drawing pad. Inside was a simple flash drive and a note, the blueprint, for Her Grace, with the compliments of the Stone Foundation. Torres, under Victoria's direct orders, immediately plugged the drive into a secure terminal. It was a single file, a high-resolution layered digital painting. It was not a file of Alistair's crimes. It was a meticulously detailed, complex diagram of the entire corporate structure of Vance Woodson Global after Victoria's restructuring. Every holding company, every subsidiary, every new trust designed to ring-fence the assets from Alistair, it was all there. And on the top layer, labeled Potential Weakness, was a single red line connecting two apparently unrelated offshore entities that Victoria and Torres had used to quietly shield a personal family tax liability. A liability completely unrelated to Alistair, but one that could, if exposed, instantly destroy Victoria's reputation as a clean CEO and invite a crippling government audit. Victoria was summoned immediately. She stared at the screen, her face ashen. Izzy hadn't kept a file to protect herself. She had kept a file to control Victoria. Izzy had used her time in the shadows of the Artists' Fund to study not just Alistair's flaws, but the flaws of the entire empire. She hadn't just secured her assets, she had secured the checkmate on the Queen. The final price of Victoria's victory became clear. Absolute eternal vigilance. Victoria picked up the secure, private phone line. "Torres," she commanded, her voice thin but recovering its steel. "We need to talk to the Stone Foundation about a very large anonymous annual contribution to their cause, effective immediately." And so, Alistair Hawthorne, the Duke, sat in a prison cell, having lost his empire. Victoria Montaigne, the Queen, sat on her throne, forever constrained by the fear of being exposed. And Isabel Stone, the artist, used the power of knowledge to quietly redefine corporate patronage and secure her own absolute, unchallenged autonomy. The true victor was the one who controlled the narrative and held the final, crucial piece of information. The end. Final. CTA, that's the end of the Duchess's Silent Vengeance saga. Which character's ending surprised you the most? Alistair's defeat, Victoria's constraint, or Izzy's ultimate power move? Let us know your final thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for the next thrilling story.